Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Western Spirit. Today, we're talking with someone who I think, and I'm going to say it from, in Hebrew, there's a saying, "En omrim shivcho shel adam lefanav," but I'm going to say nice things about you in front of you anyway. So we're talking today with Abigail Shrier, and ever since Abigail, I read her last book, Irreversible Damage, if I remember correctly, that is the name. Yeah, so ever since I remember reading it, and then I thought to myself, who is this woman that's so crazy that she's writing about such a subject that will like destroy her life? Or at least it's a danger, it might destroy her life. And I was, I don't go close to those things. And even though I know and I have opinions, but I don't say anything about it because it's too dangerous. At least I think that's what a lot of people think about these types of issues. And ever since I read the book, I have grown to, I guess, have a respect for you and think that even though maybe some people may not agree with everything, the fact that you're willing to address difficult issues that are, to put it mildly, controversial, is something that we should all strive for. And especially people who want to talk with each other, we need to be able to feel free to give our opinions no matter how many people get angry at us. And I guess we'll talk about just that issue, not even what the book says, but just how we can talk with each other about what the book says later on. And I want to say that the reason why we're talking, among other things, is that Abigail just wrote a new book, and the name of the book is, maybe tell me the name because I can't read it.
Bad Therapy, Why the Kids Aren't Growing Up.
Yes. And the book, which I didn't read yet, the whole thing, I read a little bit of the reviews and just about a few of short, summaries about it. But basically, and then I'll ask you to explain, is the book tries to grapple with the mental health crisis that is taking over the U.S., especially among kids. And I think the basic thesis of the book, and in a second we'll ask Abigail exactly about it, is that America is over therapeuting their kids, basically, right? I got that right, basically.
We have way too much intervention, too much feelings focus, too much therapy, too much mindfulness and wellness focus, and way too much diagnosis and medication. And we're over treating the well, essentially, and we're making them sick.
So before we get into let's say what the problem is in terms of what America is doing wrong, maybe we can just understand what the crisis is. So if I'm reading correctly, the number of suicidality is going up very, very much, and in America among youths, the depression is going up. I think that's like uncontroversial. I think loneliness is something that is right. People are saying that they're much lonelier. I read it not too long ago. You'll probably better know these things than I do. That the number of 18 to 24-year-olds, which is not the exact group, but I saw a poll that said that I think a third don't even have one friend. And I think that's obviously something that has to do with everybody's scared to talk to other people, scared to go out and do things. They're over
it's the most
like
fearful generation we've ever seen, the most anxious. And when asked, they will tell you over half of them believe their mental health is not good. And they ask for mental health days off of work. And they face no obvious problems. That's the thing. We have the lowest unemployment we've seen. We're not in America. We're not in the middle of any kind of war. And yet kids seem to be suffering. And I believe their suffering is real. Young people seem to be suffering at rates we've never seen. The question is why? Now, a lot of people, a popular explanation is the phones. And let me just say that right off the bat. Phones aren't great. Phones are bad. There's no question that social media has played a big and negative role in young people's mental health. I wrote my last book about the role it played in transgender identification, and the sudden convincing of so many teenage girls that they were transgender and they needed to alter their bodies in all these irreversible ways. And absolutely, leads to all kinds of depressed mood, and loneliness. There's no question it exacerbates them. But do I think it's the only thing to look at? No, I don't. And there are a few reasons why. But one of the big reasons is Israel. Israel is an amazing foil to America, and I talk about it a lot in the book, because Israel, the kids are all on the phones, as we know. Young people are all on the phones, and they have much better health than American youth. Why? Because they're living healthier lives.
In what way?
They are given independence, genuine independence. They have more that's expected of them. They contribute to the group in so many ways, including through military service. They feel that they matter. They are around family. They have extended family they live around. All these things are really good. And they have relational stability. They're seeing the same, they're close to the same people over a lifetime. These are recipes for a great life. And the other thing they're doing is their parents are not afraid to exert their authority with them, which doesn't mean being harsh. It doesn't mean being, unloving. It just means I'm in charge. I'm your parent. You have to listen to me.
Wait, I want to stop you there because that's one of the things that when I was growing up in America and then I came to Israel, it was almost like a culture shock. I came here at the age of 15 and there was no room in the dormitory of the yeshiva. So I was in a house. I was put in a room in a house with a family that had 15 kids, and they had one room for the boys and one room for the girls. And these kids were obviously, they didn't grow up like in America where every kid has his own room. And for most kids, obviously there's different exceptions, but every kid usually has his own room, and he has his own, like, he can lock the door, and he has his own, like, privacy. And then you're put in this place with 7 boys, and I don't remember the exact numbers of boys and girls, but there was a number of boys in the room with me, and the girls were all together, and it was almost a culture shock, because of the amount of kids, but because of the way they're being brought up, the way that people are being spoken to as their kids. There's authority. The father is the father. The mother is the mother. There's a certain hierarchy of things that in the U.S., even among the ultra-Orthodox community where I grew up, is not. In America, it's a lot less than it is here.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's exactly right. And by the way,
no problem.
Americans tear their hair out over raising one child because they don't assert their authority with their kids. Yeah. They're afraid to. And I believe that a lot of the reason they're afraid to is mental health experts have so undermined their confidence that they can ever assert their authority, that anything they say can be traumatizing. If they yell at a child, they can be they can traumatize them, not much less spanking. If you ever,
well, here that's a problem too. Or not a problem. That's it.
But if you ever swat a kid on the bottom, that is traumatizing. Now, I'm not here to advocate spanking. I'm not. I don't feel that that's something that's necessary or important or good or anything like that. But the idea that it's traumatizing, that's just not true. It hasn't been proven. And you have parents who are so stricken, so afraid to what they think is right, so afraid to punish, that one child becomes overwhelming because you can never say no or punish. And they're not giving that child a good life because kids need authority. This is some of the best psychological research we have. Kids need to feel that somebody's in charge. It's not me, and it's the people who love me the most. Not the therapist my mother hired. My mom's in charge. My dad's in charge. Somebody's in charge that's not me, and I have to listen to them. That is so good for kids. And we're afraid to do that in America, and it's causing all kinds of problems. And look, one of the reasons, you're seeing this outburst on college campuses.
Yes.
I talk about in the book, we're not only raising the unhappiest generation in America, we're raising an incredibly radical generation. And as a few people put it to me when I was doing these interviews, I conducted over 200 interviews for the book. And one of the extremism, experts and also immigrants to America pointed this out to me. If you're not the authority with your own children, they will go looking for daddy elsewhere. And that's what we're seeing. American kids showing up on campus who never heard no, never got a clear authority. Now they meet Hamas and they think that's an authority. That gives me something. That gives my life meaning. And so off they go to join these radical groups.
I want to ask you I'll just give another anecdote about myself, and maybe through that I'll ask you that when I was a child growing up in Brooklyn, New York, I was a very problematic child. Maybe today I think that I would be diagnosed with like 1,000 things like ADHD, ADD, OCD. I don't know, all the stuff that you talk about in the book. And my mom did take me to I remember very distinctly a number of therapists and I guess psychologists and people who work with kids like me. And I remember that it was in retrospect useless. I mean, I would sit there and they would talk to me for an hour, and usually I wouldn't say one word as like a protest. I would just sit there for an hour. The therapist would try to get something, say something, but nothing would come out. And then I would just go, and my parents would obviously pay money to the therapist. So today, I assume that if someone goes to a therapist like me and doesn't talk for an hour, he would be diagnosed with antisocial something and like some like I don't know, and then would be maybe transcribed for pills or something. Right. So what has happened? I know that you said that it's something that scares the parents, but how did it become to a place that everything is diagnosed?
Parents started in America, they really started to doubt their authority, doubt that they knew what they were doing, and they decided that they really didn't have the expertise for things like child rearing. A lot of, my generation, I'm the tail end of Gen X, grew up with divorce, and they felt like undernourished or taken care of. And they thought, you know what, I need a professional to help with this. And the problem is, and this is what I want people to know, look, adults can, or, choose therapy, choose a diagnosis or whatever, or even psychiatric medication if they feel that it will help them. An adult has a lifetime of experience to compare it to. So if they're on a medication and it, dampens or deletes their sex drive, an adult can say, I don't like the way this makes me feel. Right. I don't like missing this aspect of my life. I want to go back. It is very hard for a child or teenager to say those things or even to evaluate it. They don't know what's a phase. And the problem is, look, you just mentioned that every adult almost everyone who's interesting at all has a story like yours, that they would have been diagnosed with 3 different things if they had been taken, right? And that's what we call unique. That's what we call interesting, right? They make for the most interesting adults in my experience. And the problem with taking your kid to a therapist who gives them a diagnosis is now they have a label right. that says they have a limitation and a brain problem. Not, oh gosh, I need to buckle down, I'm not working hard. Not, I don't find this interesting. Let me try to find something else that's more interesting to me. No, I have a brain problem now. And that is a profound intervention. Let me just say, I don't believe that no one should get therapy. I believe that therapy, if you really need it, even a child should avail them, should be taken to a therapist if they really have a problem. Same with psychiatric medications, okay? By all means, if you have a kid who's anorexic, get them help immediately, okay? So just to be very clear about that, I am no more anti-psychotherapy than I would be anti-chemotherapy. If you have a problem, get help. The problem comes with kids who don't have a clear mental health problem. Maybe they're antsy, maybe they don't really like the class, maybe they're not studious, but they don't have a clear mental health problem or mental problem. You give a kid like that a diagnosis and you're telling them forever, here's your label, here's the medication, only science can fix you, and now you have a permanent limitation to think about.
Right.
That's something that we do as our last resort. Unfortunately, it is a first step in America. And so we're seeing, I'll just give you one statistic to give you a sense of where things have gone in America. Okay. In the year 2016, this was before the pandemic and before most kids had smartphones. 2016, little kids between the ages of 2 and 8, okay, none of them had smartphones. Little kids, 1 in 6 of them already had a mental health or behavioral diagnosis. That's a lot of kids. We were diagnosing everyone. Okay.
And now it's probably much higher.
Yes, it is. And we know that it is. First of all, they just approved Lexapro, which is a very strong antidepressant for 7-year-olds in America. We are putting kids on such strong and personality altering and medications. And unfortunately, the problem is not that we ever do it. The problem is now it's a first resort.
As you're talking, I think of 2 different maybe questions or observations. Number one, you mentioned you basically put Israel and America, so you put them in 2 different camps. And I was thinking about it, that if you look at Israeli society, we're becoming, in terms of our belief systems, our society is becoming more traditional. I'm not religious per se, but more people say they are part of a community. More people say they go to synagogue and on a fairly regular basis than ever before. More people feel in the polls that they're connected to Judaism. Here, it could be Christianity in America. Here, it's Judaism. More people say that they feel connected to being Israeli. They're proud of being Israeli. Well, after 7th of October, we'll have to see soon different, results. But I'm saying up until. And in America, the opposite is happening, whereas you're having people more isolated. Church attendance is going way down over the last 2 years. Yeah. And so my question is, a lot of times maybe people are feeling depressed, feeling that they need to go to these therapists because they have nothing else. Even the parents, they have no one to turn to. They don't have a community.
That's right. We're giving young people, unhealthy lives, disconnected lives, lack of independence, constant parental oversight and anxiety about them, no connection to extended family, no strong relations over a lifetime, neighbor kids, friends you've had since birth, cousins. We don't give them any of that. And then they're unhappy. And we put them in front of tech. And then they're unhappy. And then we pour in the mental health resources. But what we need to do is subtract the bad stuff and give them the stuff they actually need. And let me just say, it was funny. I was talking to an Israeli friend, in the last couple of months, who said to me, she's on the left political left in Israel. And she was saying, it's terrible. The government hasn't done anything for us. and they don't, everything that's being done for the families that have been displaced, it's all, volunteers, neighbors, doing cookouts, and it's all private. The government hasn't done anything. And it's very funny because, we would kill for that in America, right? Because you can't buy that. In America, neighbors giving each other things, sending boxes of clothes, making things for soldiers, hosting cookouts to feed them. You can't buy that. It's worth so much more than the government. If you think the government would come in and do a better job, because the stuff that fills us up is person to person. It's neighbor to neighbor. Okay? Friend to friend. It's not when they send someone from the government with a box.
Yeah.
And what you have in Israel is so special. It's so unique. And unfortunately, we've lost it in America. We used to have those things, and we desperately need to get back to it. And the reason I think that the mental health industry has taken us in the wrong direction. They have sold us on the idea that if we just diagnose every kid, if we just pour in the medication, we'll fix them. But the problem is the lives they're living. For most kids, the problem is not that they are, can never learn. It's that the teacher's not good, or they've been handed an iPad before school, or they're not eating right, or they're not getting an exercise, or they're not connected to people who love them. That'll make a kid really antsy when they show up for school. Okay? So we're not giving them the things they actually need. Instead, we're just pouring in the mental health medications and resources.
Abigail, I have one more hypothesis. Tell me what you think about this.
Yeah.
It seems that I would say this just broadly, but one of the things that I'm seeing in these protests against, I would say this, not against is a pro-Hamas. I think we could just say that.
Yeah.
It's not against Israeli policy, because that is fine, but it seems that it's just pro-Hamas, anti-Jewish at this point.
The protests started before Israel had any response to October 7th. Any military intervention, the protests were already going on on our American campuses.
Yes. And so one of the things that it seems to me in terms of the way people phrase what they're saying, because I'm not talking about the Islamists, I'm talking about the progressive white student that goes to this protest, is this narrative of the world being either a oppressor or an oppressed. The whole world is a binary. And so the oppressed is always right. And if that is the case, then a lot of these students or children or mothers and fathers who believe this, meaning they believe that to be a victim is a merit, it's a virtue. It's good to be a victim because you get society to be on your side. Does that play a role in the fact that so many people are looking to get diagnosed? Meaning that if you're not diagnosed and you're a regular person, there's nothing good about you. You're regular. But if you're diagnosed, you're very special.
Okay, so a few things. First of all, does that play a role, your question? Absolutely. The Americans feel unwell, and they were looking for, their young Americans are looking for a few things. They're looking for, adulation. They're looking for acceptance. Yes. They're not going to get it if they show up as a white American, and they're looking to belong. But so all those things, and also they do feel sad. They do feel lonely, and they don't know why. They don't know why. You see, in Israel, they tell kids 8 and up to go walk to school. Go to the bus. You can do it. In America, we don't let them out of our sight. So they show up in college campus having never done anything meaningful on their own. It feels awful to show up and being told you're an adult now at 18, but you don't feel like an adult.
Yes.
You don't feel like an adult. You feel useless. You've never done anything on your own. Your parents have never trusted you to go around the block, right? So a lot of people talk about the oppressed, the oppressor, and the colonialist, ideology of the, Marxist critical thought, school of thought. And do I think that plays a role? Absolutely. But my own take is a little different. And that's that the ideology is more surface, that people reach for it because they have a deeper disturbance. See, the ideology itself doesn't make a lot of sense. The idea that the Jews are colonialists in Israel make no sense. The idea of queers for Palestine makes no sense, right? So what is it? It's unhappiness. It's misery. It's jealousy. That's all it is.
It's self-hatred.
It is. It's alienation.
Yeah.
They feel so uncomfortable, right? That's why they will cry and ask for mental health days off of work when there's nothing wrong with them. Nothing physical anyway.
Right. Is this also what the whole thing where we see on campuses, the safe spaces and places where we can feel like,
that's right.
There's all these days of like racial segregated days now on campuses where we don't want to see anyone who looks different from us.
Right.
It seems like what you're saying is exactly that.
That's right. So in my book, in Bad Therapy, I call this emotional hypochondriasis, or they're emotional hypochondriacs. Basically, I interviewed a world expert on hypochondriasis, what they now call illness, anxiety disorder, or somatic symptom disorder. But basically, it's the same thing. And the idea, what is it? Hypochondriasis, or being a hypochondriac, does not mean you're faking it. It doesn't mean that you're imagining your pain. It's the application of a hyper focus to the normal pains we all feel. And through that hyper focus, you exacerbate your pain. That's real. That's how strong our minds are. And I think that young people are doing that today with their feelings, with their emotions. Yes. With our therapeutic culture and therapeutic industry, we have so focused their attention on themselves as individuals, on their own personal private pain, that they can never get beyond it. It's a very unhealthy focus. And they are exacerbating their pain. And then they hear a speaker come to campus who says something they don't think they agree with, and they absolutely panic. Yeah. And I've been on college campuses and seen these absolute hysterics, shrieking things.
At you.
Saying, what? Go ahead.
At you, for example. Shrieking things at you.
Like they're going to die. And I do believe their pain is real. Yeah. They are absolutely frantic. And they are frantic because they have been taught to obsess over their hurt feelings. And it's a very, very unhealthy focus.
Yes. When I see the protests, a lot of times, I'm talking about not the people who are there obviously for Islamist reasons because they really want jihad or whatever, but about the youths who grow up in America. A lot of times I do feel it's almost sad to watch it. It's almost like they need help. They need help in a good way. They need help to maybe someone to, give them a hug and tell them it'll be okay. So there is something there, but
it's so sad. It's so sad. They line up like toddlers.
Mm-hmm. And the chanting all together,
right. They say, repeat after me. And they do it like automatons.
Mm-hmm.
It is so sad. Yes. It really is. These kids, and they look zombified. A number of people have commented, they look like zombies. They are the picture of misery. They should be enjoying life. Why don't they? Because they don't know life is an adventure. And yes, you get hurt and things don't go your way. And then you pick yourself up and keep going. They don't know that because no one has told them. And I'll tell you something else that we're missing in America that obviously Israel has in spades. We are missing a connection to history. We are missing a connection to our grandparents. These kids don't know what their great-grandparents went through because it was considered by therapists a burden. We didn't want to burden them. We don't want to scare them. What they don't understand is that, yes, okay, it's a burden hearing that your grandparents or great-grandfather went through something hard because now I have something I have to live up to, right? But it's also an amazing relief because now you tell yourself, you know what? My great-grandfather got through the Holocaust or whatever it is. I can get through hard things too.
Yeah.
And we aren't taught that in America. So young kids don't know it and they get a bad grade and they have a nervous breakdown.
Mm-hmm. Abigail, I want to ask you one question, then I'll give you one more anecdote about myself and see what you have to say. Because all the stuff that you're talking about are things that I can relate to in the sense that I went through different, I would say, hardships or bad breaks, and I could have, done a lot of what maybe some of these young people are doing now, but I didn't, and now I'm somewhere good. And so life is, as you said, a journey. But before I get to that, one question about, is there a breakdown of where, in terms of geography and maybe also demographics, where the people are more medicated? Is it maybe in blue states or red states? Is there some kind of difference between the people?
Can you guess?
Well, I would guess that in blue states, just because it seems that people are more isolated. I grew up in a big city in New York, and you could see people living in the same building. They never talk to each other.
Right.
And yet when when I was out of the army in Israel, I came to America, me and my dad did after a lot of years, because I was in Israel for a lot of years, we didn't really meet to see each other. I went and we did a cross country. And when we got out of the cities, people were so nice to each other. And you live far from each other, but when you see each other, people are saying hi and good morning, good afternoon, sorry, thank you, and all that. And they genuinely meant it. And that was so nice because I thought America was New York at the time. And then suddenly, so I would guess that the big cities, people live in,
So there's this thing called they describe it various ways, the Latino paradox or the Latino immigrant paradox that they talk about in sociology sometimes. And what is this paradox? That we have these immigrants from Latin America and, and they come to our country poor, dirt poor. And their kids have better mental health than ours do in America. This is the great paradox. Why is it
not such a paradox?
It's not such a paradox. Of course it's not. It's only a paradox if you're committed to the idea that money is what makes you happy.
Yes.
Because they don't have money and they don't have, they have a lot of struggles and they have some of the most important stuff in life too. They have authority with their own kids. They have connection, human connection with community. Right. They do things for each other. They think they contribute to the group. Okay. They do all the good stuff. And you know what they don't do? Immediately diagnose and hand their kids off to a shrink.
Because they don't have money for it.
That's right. So you might say, well, the book that I wrote, is it just an upper middle class problem? No. Right. And here's why. Because in America, we've gone into all the public schools and we're trying to do the same things to everyone. We're diagnosing kids in public school. We're teaching them social, emotional coping skills. We're never punishing them for bad behavior anymore. Now they're treated like, they are mentally disturbed or distressed instead of kids who are punished or treated respectfully. Look, you misbehaved. Here's the punishment. That's no longer. You're no longer regarded as a person with agency. Instead, we go hunting for your childhood trauma. Yes. That's what teachers, it's called trauma-informed care, and they're doing it all over America in public schools. So
you can't say that it's more of so could we say any demographics in terms of, obviously, like what you just said, it means that it's in schools, in public schools, so that even the poor kids will be pushed down their throats. On the other hand, their family life is very different from someone who goes to private school maybe and has money, but lives in somewhere where his parents don't want him leaving the house by himself and he's not going to church or synagogue. So how do you, in terms of the numbers, where people get more diagnosed?
It's a good question. So obviously the, upper middle class, they're the most diagnosed.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a good question. Look, sometimes people say to me, but don't kids show up with real problems, especially in, inner cities? Of course they do. Of course they do. Do they need more support than the average kid? Absolutely. But what they don't need is an immediate diagnosis and being treated as if they're mentally ill and mentally incapable. What they don't need is being told that they have an ACEs score. Now, this is adverse childhood experiences, and they literally treat this as a diagnosis. They will look at what you've had in your lifetime, oh gosh, parents divorced or a single mother, you have addiction in your family, and they call this an ACE. They count up these and they call it an ACEs score. And then they treat that as a child's sort of number for what they can do in life or how limited they will be. That's how it's effectively used in schools today. And it's the opposite of what we should be doing with kids. We should be showing them that we believe in them, that they can achieve great things, even whatever they've come from, and and they absolutely should get more support, but that doesn't mean more diagnosis or more therapy.
Right. I would just say, I said I would give you another personal story, just maybe to accentuate the absurdity of this kind of stuff. And I'm sorry that I agree with you almost about everything. It's just me. My personal story is that, and we spoke about before we started recording, is that about 4.5 years ago, 5 years ago, I loved driving, and I worked in the Israeli Knesset, and I lived near Tel Aviv, and I would every night go back and forth to Jerusalem. And then I started going out with who now is my wife and the mother of my children, and she lived about 15 minutes away. And the way to go there was, whoever was in Israel knows there's lots of roundabouts where instead of the lights, they put roundabouts to go around the circles. And instead of going around, at some point, I started just going through the circles and crashing into the circles. And then one night, I always said it's nothing, everything's okay. And then one night I came back I brought my wife, at the time girlfriend, back home. And on driving back, I crashed into a construction site. And like in the movies, the car jumped up and landed inside the construction site. And then it was like 11 o'clock at night. And I remember sitting there, and it's all dark all around, and there's a tractor next to me and a cement truck. And and I was thinking, okay, something's wrong. I need to take care of it. And the next day I went to the hospital, and I was there for a few weeks. And in the beginning, they thought I had a brain tumor that was pressing against my eyes. And when that turned out not to be true, after lots and lots of tests, they found that I have a rare disease, which makes people get blind. And now I'm legally blind, you can say. And I remember after they diagnosed me, they said you can go to a therapist or someone who gives you advice about how to navigate the system where the government gives you benefits. So I went in, and I was 30 years old, 29 years old at the time. And she says to me, my advice is quit your job. And I said, but I have at least like 35, 40 years to work. I hope to live and work. And she says, yes, but if you want the government check, then you can't work. And I said, I'm going to give up the government check. Everything's okay. And then I wrote to the head of the this equivalent of Social Security and complained, but that's the law. And my point is that I could have easily gone into my bed, snuggled under the covers, and said, my life's over. I'm losing my eyesight. And I didn't do that. And I think the reason why I didn't do that in the end is because I made a conscious decision to continue living. But I could have easily made another decision. And I think the way people are being brought up today in America and maybe some of Europe is that they would have put their hands up and gone into their bed and just given up. And I think that's something people aren't able to work with hardships nowadays a lot of times.
That's right. And the sad thing is we all have them. We all have disappointments and hardships. And kids, imagine if you had been a kid at the time and what teachers would have said to you, at least in America. I have to say right now, everyone would have been aware he has a disability. Now we have to, right? He can't do the things normal kids can do. And that will be the official line on you with everyone. And the problem is, look at all the amazing things you could do and did do that fill your life with so much meaning, like having a family. I mean, what's better than that? Right. And yet we're taking kids who have faced much less hardship than you or much less challenge. And we're telling them that they're disabled and that they can't, they should never expect to have a family. And this generation wants a family and children less than we've ever seen, in lower numbers we've ever seen in America. They don't feel up to it.
You think that's the reason? They feel scared of having children?
Well, they'll say climate change, or they'll say it lots of different ways. But the bottom line is, it's very clear they don't feel strong. How do I know this? They demand a mental health day off of work. Mm-hmm. They run to HR to complain about their boss if he says something that offends them. Yeah. They feel fragile. They feel scared. They don't feel well. Because when you're well and someone says something mean to you, you brush it off. Right? That's how you react when you feel well. When you feel well, you think, you know what? I can help someone else. Maybe I'll get married. Maybe I'll find someone and together we'll raise kids. We'll do something for someone else. That's what you do when you feel strong. And in America, we've obsessed for the last generation over how to make kids happy. We haven't made them happy, by the way, but how to make them happy. And we paid no attention to how could we make them strong. And so they aren't.
Yeah. Abigail, could I ask you a few questions about your former book? Because when you were here, I wasn't able to. I did ask to meet you, but it just didn't turn out. The timing was different, so I'm using this opportunity.
Sure, go for it.
So the just to remind me the name of the book. It was Irreversible Damage, right? That was the name of the book. So basically, you tackled the subject that I guess my first question is, why did you feel the need to talk about something that is true and important, but at the same time could get you into a lot of trouble in terms of what people say about you, how people react to you? You mentioned people screaming at you like their lives are on the line just by seeing you. So why did you think it was so important to write about it?
Because I'm more afraid of lies than I am afraid of the truth. So what I mean by that is kids were getting badly hurt. They're still getting badly hurt in this country. And I set out to write a book about young women because I wanted to know, how were they doing today? And I originally wrote to my agent at the time and said, I'm interested in writing sort of a feminist update on how young women are doing. And one of the things that when I asked, how are young women doing? I noticed that a large number of them didn't want to be young women anymore. They were asking to be, they said they were boys and they were asking to be men. But of course, young women can't become men. And the dangers were everywhere. And doctors were willing to talk about it to me. But unfortunately, it wasn't breaking through to the culture at all because so many people were afraid to say what was true, which is that puberty blockers are horrifically dangerous and risky with very few proven benefits, if any, with this population. The evidence is very weak that they do anything to improve young people's mental health. There's no evidence that the suicidality was caused by gender dysphoria in this population. And yet we were going ahead with hormones and surgeries, even in some cases on minors, kids, and in some cases without their parents' permission. So I wrote the book because it was true. And that's my job. My job is to write about things people don't already know. And I don't know why that's so controversial, to be honest, in America, why we've seemed to have forgotten that that's the job.
Abigail, what exactly, because in 2020, when I think that's when your book came out, that book, the former book.
So 2020 was the original American edition. Then there was a British edition that was 2021. Yeah, but it came out in June of 2020.
So when it came out, it was a lot, I think, a lot less popular to say what you said, and now is a lot more. So we hear people, the Cass report in England just came out about basically a lot of the things that you said they say in that report, and there's been hearings in parliaments all over the world and certain prohibitions of certain treatments in different countries. Why do you think the US, I think, is like one of the main countries in the world that is so in a lot of the states so open to a lot of these stuff that in other countries they know already that it's very dangerous?
I don't remember a time when we ever saw Americans more fearful. We are seeing such mass fear in America. They are so afraid of so many things. Okay. They're afraid of their own children in America. And we're seeing this on so many levels. So people are terrified of speaking their truth. They're terrified of losing their jobs, even for straightforwardly saying, you don't have to insult anybody. You don't have to attack anybody. But these medical protocols are unsafe. They have clear risks that are completely outweigh any purported benefit. And there are a lot of dangers that come. And there are a lot of unknowns about things like pouring, 10 to 40 times the amount of testosterone a woman would naturally have in her body into her body. That's a dangerous thing to do for various reasons.
Abigail, could you just remind us what you found in your book in terms of why there's such first of all, what are the actual numbers of the explosion of young girls that want to become boys, like you put it? I think like they put it. And what do you think, what was the hypothesis of the book, just in simple terms, because I'm pretty sure that most of the people that will be watching us remember.
My fault. Yes, irreversible damage was it was the first major treatment of the sudden spike in transgender identification among teenage girls out of nowhere, starting around 2012. Or a little thereafter, we suddenly saw this large number of girls deciding they were transgender. This had been a gender dysphoria, which is the severe discomfort in one's biological sex, it's been around for 100 years. We've known about it. And it always afflicted men and boys. And it always began in early childhood, ages 2 and 4, predominantly began in early childhood. Now, for the first time in history, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, with the rise of, social media, we saw the spike. The largest demographic was teenage girls, and they were coming out in friend groups. So they were deciding with their friends they were transgender. This had never existed before. So what was the cause? It was a social contagion, meaning from social media influencers, with the encouragement often of their therapist. They were deciding that their problem was something that had never existed before among teen girls, gender dysphoria. And of course, girls naturally feel uncomfortable in their bodies around puberty, but what they were deciding the solution was, it must be that I'm really a boy. And the solution is hormones and surgeries. And unfortunately, in America, we had this system where there were no breaks and very little oversight. And the moment young girls decided this, they could very easily begin to obtain affirmation and then medical treatment, a medical intervention that was irreversible.
When you say that there was a spike, I remember, I don't want to say because I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was crazy, or it still is crazy, the jump in percentage of girls that suddenly said they're boys, right?
Right. It's very, very large. In England, where they have centralized medicine, so it's easier for them to produce the numbers, at the Tavistock Clinic, they saw a 4,000% rise in the previous decade. And it was overwhelmingly girls. In young adolescents requesting gender intervention. In the U.S., it's harder to know, but I think the between the years of, I think it was, and I'm forgetting, but I think it was 2016 and 2017, or maybe it was 2017, 2018, the number of gender surgeries quadrupled, and they were specifically for females. All of a sudden, you're seeing all these young women deciding they wanted surgeries, they wanted their breasts removed.
And can we say that there was clusters of women, meaning that if one said that she was and she came out to her friend group, then let's say 3 more friends said in that group just to feel...
Exactly. So there were 70 times the typical prevalence rate within friend groups. That was the strange thing. I've interviewed a lot of transgender individuals for my book, and one thing they will tell you is they didn't do this with their friends. They didn't come to this decision with their friends. They always felt uncomfortable in their bodies for various reasons, but it wasn't something they did for popularity. But all of a sudden, these teen girls were doing it with their friends. They were making this decision. I was getting calls from parents. 20 to 30% of 7th grade girls in a single class would decide they were non-binary or transgender.
20 to 30%?
In some cases, yes, of a single class. A single class of 7th graders you were seeing. And so you're seeing extraordinarily high numbers all of a sudden. And that's a social contagion, right?
Yeah.
Out of nowhere. That's not an organic problem. And the problem was they were then getting the hormones and surgeries of a condition that it really wasn't organic to them. And so they were very likely to regret the irreversible changes they were making to their bodies.
Right. And I would just say that I think this ties in with your current book in the sense that the over medication and over sort of like going to experts to know what's happening with your child instead of just saying, okay, you feel you're a boy, let's talk about it. I don't think you're a boy, let's try to like talk with our children. Instead, we're sending them to experts who a lot of times have other interests maybe and other opinions and ideologues a lot of times. And I think...
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I think we could tie it in with both books.
That's right. I mean, that's right. In fact, in almost every case where I talk to the, families, the girl already had a therapist and wasn't a gender therapist. She decided with her therapist that she was transgender. Now, why was she seeing the therapist? Sometimes she had anxiety or depression. And with the therapist, she was being encouraged in the idea that the problem was gender and the cure was medical transition. And here's the thing I want people to know. If you tell a child, a young person or a young teenager goes to talk to their aunt or their grandmother because they're unhappy, at some point, grandma or an aunt will say, okay, now go play, go outside, go do something. You know what a therapist never says to your kid?
Leave.
Take them. Yeah. They never say, you're all done. Get out of here. Go do something.
That's it. We're finished. You're good.
Right. And that's the problem. The problem is you're never good. You're never good to go. You've talked about your problem. Now it's time to go into the world and play.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of the over treatment, over focus on feelings, over focus on your pain is coming in.
To conclude, I want to talk about what we started off about. I mentioned free speech and the fact that people aren't able to talk with each other and cope with ideas that make them uncomfortable. Let's put it that way. When your book came out, I remember that there was a controversy where some stores took the book out or banned the book. I think it was, I don't want to say names because I don't want to get sued. So you say
Israel. You took my book out of several stores.
Yeah, in Israel, we'll talk about that, but first about America, and then I'll ask you about it.
Say the name.
Well, I assume there's only 2 big bookstores in Israel, so it has to be either both or one. Yeah. But in America, they were
several. Yeah, but it was still available in at least one. My kids saw it when we were in Israel, and they got all excited. But I know, if I'm allowed to say it, Steinmatzky's took it out and refused to sell it.
I think you're allowed to say it.
That's straight American cancel culture. That's how we handle disagreements in America. We try to ban your book.
Yes. So I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned in the beginning. So first of all, maybe before what you mentioned in the beginning, what do you how do you get across when people aren't willing to listen? So it's not even that people don't want to listen. They don't refuse to even talk to you about what their opinion is because they refuse to even see you. Like you mentioned that girl, you're standing on the stage or wherever at some university. And I assume this wasn't one girl. This happens over and over where they just come, and there's videos of this all over. It's very fun to watch, but it does show that they're unable to cope with even looking at someone who thinks different than them.
So that's not my reader. I'm not there to try to get through to someone who's so filled with ideology they don't want to listen. My reader in general is parents. And parents are very reasonable. They're the most reasonable people. Why? Because they have to practically ensure the safety and welfare and thriving of their own kids. They care about it. They're not committed to an ideology above their children. Right? And so what I write to parents to do is not to tell them how to parent, because I'm no parenting expert. I don't even believe in parenting experts. But what I write to do is try to make them more aware of the risks. And one of the things that parents weren't aware of, aside from the whole, transgender contagion and the transgender identification contagion, was the fact that through a lot of this, what I call bad therapy, which is, over focus on feelings, over focus on your pain, isolating kids and over diagnosing them. We were making kids unhealthy in America. And I don't tell people, I'm not someone who gets in there and tells you how to raise your kids. You should raise them according to your own values. Right. But I do want parents to be aware of some of the risks of some of these things that that sort of dress themselves up as only helpful, but actually come with a lot of hidden risks.
Abigail, was there anyone who really went after you and then you were able to have a conversation with them that was rational and calm, or were these types of people, no one was even willing to talk to you?
Oh, I think a lot of people turned out to be very reasonable. It's so funny because a British journalist just apologized to me over Twitter, which I have never seen before, but it was so nice. She said, I hadn't read your book and I attacked you, and now I've since read it and I'm so embarrassed and I've lost sleep over it. And it was it was so sweet. I couldn't believe it. I've never gotten that in America, but
you won't get that here
sweet.
too.
What? Sorry?
You won't get that here too. So
I don't know. It was very, very nice. But let me just say, like, everyone in Israel was very nice to me while I was there. Yes, you had some, very exercised protesters. I think, leading off from the large, protests you had at the time. I was there in May of 2023 was when I was there, right? Last May.
Yeah, exactly right. A year ago. They said.
Exactly a year ago. And so you'd been having all these protests, so then it just led into protests for me somehow against me, but that's all right. People were wonderful and very reasonable, and look, before you put life-altering medication into your children, you really should be aware of the risk.
I think you're too generous, because I just want to mention what happened here when you came. What happened was that one of Israel's best singers, like most famous, Gali Attar, she's like one of the most famous singers in Israel, and like an oldie in terms of, she's been here for years, she's iconic. She made one of her songs, she made a new video of it, and in the song, she burns your book. I just want to like make people understand how much. It wasn't just a few people. It became Haaretz wrote. I just researched it before we spoke. And it was a big thing, and people were writing things against you and protesting. They had to move your venue to another place.
Yeah, I got kicked out of a lot of venues in Tel Aviv.
Yeah, so that is my last question. You mentioned in the beginning that there's a difference between Israel and America. And then you come here and you see that at least in Tel Aviv, there is a significant number of people that, at least on the surface, seem to disagree with you, not just disagree, but not be willing to let you speak to other people. They don't have to listen, but they refuse to even allow you the event to go ahead in a private place. So what do you maybe think?
Tel Aviv Pride went around getting me kicked out of venues. That's what they did. But
not surprising.
Pride is a very aggressive movement in America as well, and they engage in the same sort of bully tactics. It's not, I have only love for gay people and feel very warmly about so many people who are gay. It's not about them, but the Pride movement is, and a lot of things done in the name of Pride,
the activists.
The activists are very aggressive, and so they got me kicked out of venues. But let me just say, I had a great time in Israel, and I do regard that as a transplant from America. We are exporting this, what they call cancel culture, or this incredible intolerance and this incredibly unhealthy culture. And it gives me no pleasure to say that I love America. It's my home, but a lot of the culture of America right now is absolutely toxic for families, including this transgender identification contagion. Families will tell you it tore them apart. Yes. And I would just say that it's not native to Israel, which is naturally a very warm and practical and understanding place, and a place where you do have heated debate, but you can still talk to each other and you're still family. And I just, I hope that the negative elements of American culture don't take root in Israel.
Me too. I just want to say that it was a pleasure talking to you. I think and I also want to say that most of my episodes lately have been about what's happening in terms of October 7th and America, anti-Semitism, and the Israeli economy post the war and all these things. And I think that it was refreshing, maybe not in a good way, but it was refreshing to talk about other problems that maybe like your problems that you say we have less of. So I guess that's good. So that is, I feel good about our talk, even though it was about something that wasn't too positive. But
let me tell you, watching Israeli members of Gen Z, the rising generation, march off to war.
Yes.
Was one of the most beautiful and astonishing things I've ever seen. It is unimaginable that Gen Z in America would have done that. And it just shows that you're doing something really right.
I agree.
And I just hope you preserve it.
Yes. And I'll also just say, if you already mentioned that when you came in 2023, there was all these protests, and it went all the way until October 6th. Matter of fact, on October 6th, it was the Simchat Torah holiday, and there was huge protests because in Tel Aviv there was supposed to be a party on Motzei, on the next day after Simchat Torah of the Orthodox community, where there was supposed to be women on one side and men on the other, and the liberal, I guess, secular movements were protesting against it, and it went even to the courts, and they were fighting with each other. And then October 7th happens, and both the secular people who were protesting on one side and the religious people that were on the other side both went into the same tanks to sit with each other and fight in Gaza, or to the same armored vehicles. And I think that's something that is lost in a lot of the West, the sort of community that we have with each other, and the sense of belonging. And even though you could be Gen Z with the TikTok and all that kind of stuff, but when you see what's happening around you, you feel like you have to do something and be together. So we could fight, but at the end of the day, we're going to be fighting with each other against a common enemy. It's a shame that we have to have a common enemy to feel that way sometimes, but I think that is something that's very hopeful.
All people need purpose, and they need meaning, and they need connection. And, obviously, not in any way to minimize the horror and tragedy of October 7th, but having a common purpose and common meaning and community, those things are so precious. And let me tell you, we desperately need them in America. And we don't have them right now. We really don't. And to the extent that we need them, and you do. So I would just say, I hope you feel really great about that, because you should.
Abigail Shrier, it was a pleasure talking to you. And as I said before, you're invited to us for Shabbat dinner when you come. I'll make sure there's no protest outside our door. And
Thank you so
I
much.
really appreciate it. It was interesting. It was thoughtful, and it's important what you have to say. And it was a pleasure. So thank you so much.
Likewise. Take care.